Shun Uruma was an ordinary and timid child who stood out only because of his weakness, and that weakness made him a constant target at school. 5 classmates chose him as their source of entertainment, tormenting him daily with beatings, insults, and humiliation that slowly stripped away his sense of self. What began as teasing escalated into cruelty, and cruelty turned into routine violence. Teachers noticed but did nothing. Classmates watched but stayed silent. And Shun learned that suffering could exist openly without consequence. Each day he endured pain quietly, believing that if he stayed silent long enough, it might eventually stop. But it never did. The bullying followed him everywhere, poisoning his thoughts and breaking his spirit, until one day it crossed a point of no return. The same people who laughed while hurting him destroyed his home and shattered his family, leaving death and irreversible damage behind. Shun survived, but survival came at a cost, as his brother was left trapped in an unmoving body, and the warmth of family disappeared forever. In the aftermath, Shun felt no anger, no sadness, only a hollow emptiness that consumed everything inside him. With nowhere else to go, he was taken in by his grandfather, a man shaped by war who believed the world was ruled by strength and cruelty rather than kindness. Instead of offering comfort, his grandfather spoke harsh truths, telling Shun that weakness invites destruction and mercy has no place in reality. He offered Shun a choice without saying it aloud: remain weak and be crushed, or become strong and survive. As Shun listened, something deep within him began to change. The child who once hoped for rescue slowly disappeared, replaced by someone who understood that the world would never be fair. That night marked the end of Shun Uruma's innocence, and the quiet beginning of a path soaked in pain, discipline, and revenge, a path from which there would be no return. Chapter 2: Shun Uruma's life after the tragedy moved forward in silence, not because the pain had healed, but because it had sunk too deep to be expressed. He no longer reacted to the world around him, no longer questioned why things had happened, and no longer expected anything from tomorrow. His grandfather observed this emptiness closely and understood that grief alone would eventually destroy the boy. Having survived war and human brutality, the old man believed that despair could only be fought with purpose, and purpose could only be forged through strength. Without ceremony, he began Shun's training, pushing him into a routine built on exhaustion, discipline, and pain. Shun's body was weak at first, collapsing repeatedly under the strain, but his grandfather offered no sympathy, forcing him to stand again every time he fell. Pain became a daily companion, carving itself into Shun's muscles and bones, while his mind was reshaped through harsh lessons about fear, violence, and control. His grandfather taught him that humans are not ruled by morality, but by power, that fear is the strongest weapon, and that hesitation is the moment when a person loses everything. As the days passed, Shun's physical endurance slowly improved, but the greater change happened within his mind, where anger began to replace emptiness and memory sharpened into focus. The faces of the 5 bullies returned to him clearly, their laughter echoing in his thoughts, as he realized that they continued to live peacefully while his world had been erased. This realization ignited something dangerous inside him, a sense of imbalance that demanded correction. One evening, his grandfather spoke plainly, telling Shun that once a person chooses revenge, they must abandon mercy, and accept that there will be no redemption at the end of the path. Shun listened without hesitation, fully aware that there was nothing left for him to protect and no future waiting beyond his pain. In that moment, he accepted the path before him, not as a victim seeking justice, but as someone who had decided that those responsible for his suffering would one day face the consequences, one by one, without forgiveness. Chapter 3: Time passed, but nothing healed. Shun Uruma's body grew stronger, and his eyes grew colder. The training never stopped, and neither did the memories. Every movement he learned had a purpose. Every strike was meant to end the fight quickly. His grandfather taught him restraint, only so it could be discarded when needed. Strength without intent was meaningless. Intent without hesitation was lethal. Shun returned to school. The same hallways, the same classrooms, the same faces. The 5 bullies were still there. They laughed as before. They spoke loudly, confidently, without fear. They had grown, but not changed. When they saw Shun, they smirked. To them, he was still the same weak boy they once crushed. They believed time had erased the past. They were wrong. Shun watched them carefully. Their habits, their arrogance, their carelessness. He understood now how easily humans exposed themselves when they felt safe. One of them approached him, mocking him openly, reminding him of his place. The others laughed. The same laughter that once broke him. Shun felt nothing. No fear, no anger, only clarity. That night he stood alone, remembering his grandfather's words. Once you take the first step, you cannot return. Mercy creates hesitation. Hesitation leads to defeat. Shun accepted it. The child who endured silently no longer existed. The victim was gone. What remained was someone who would act. Someone who would not stop once it began. The first target had already been chosen, and the countdown to revenge had begun. Chapter 4. Shun did not rush. Revenge required patience. He followed his first target quietly, watched where he went after school, noted the streets he used, the places where no one paid attention. The boy lived without fear. He walked freely, laughed loudly, and trusted the world around him. He never once looked over his shoulder. That carelessness made the decision easier. Shun waited until night. The city grew silent, and shadows stretched across empty streets. This was where weakness revealed itself. When the moment came, Shun did not hesitate. One strike was enough to drop him. Another to make sure he could not run. The fear appeared instantly, raw and uncontrollable. The laughter was gone. The confidence vanished. The boy begged. He denied everything. He pretended not to remember. Shun listened without emotion. He reminded him. Every word, every act, every moment of cruelty that had destroyed his life. The truth finally reached him. This was not bullying anymore. This was consequence. Shun left him broken, alive only long enough to understand why it happened. No witnesses. No noise. As Shun walked away, his hands were steady. His heart was calm. The first step had been taken. There was no guilt. No relief, only certainty. This path would continue.